The first time Avery knocked on the towering mahogany door of the Belmont estate, she thought the universe was playing a cruel joke. Who in their right mind needed 12 gallons of imported spring water, 3 boxes of French pastries, and 4 kinds of grapes delivered to their doorstep at 9 in the morning? Only someone so rich that their boredom translated into extravagance. But when the door finally swung open, Avery forgot how to breathe. Standing there was Charlotte Belmont, the only daughter of the Belmont Empire, heiress to billions. Her name splashed across magazines Avery could never afford to buy. She was the kind of woman whose picture-perfect face made you question your own humanity, as if the gods had poured extra light into her existence. Yet her eyes icy blue, calculating, looked at Avery as though she were invisible. "Leave them inside," Charlotte said, her tone clipped, her diamond bracelet catching the sunlight. Avery, clutching the paper bags like a lifeline, forced herself to step into the grand foyer. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a staircase wide enough to drive a car down. She felt her sneakers squeak, echoing her place in this house. Temporary, forgettable. And yet, something lingered when Charlotte's gaze flicked back at her. It wasn't gratitude, it was curiosity, a flicker so brief Avery almost convinced herself she imagined it. That was the beginning. Avery Ramirez never planned on being anyone's fantasy. She was 23, broke, and juggling 2 jobs just to keep her mom's apartment from collapsing into unpaid bills. Grocery delivery wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. She liked the rhythm of it. Scanning barcodes, stacking bags, driving across the city. It was ordinary, predictable, safe. Charlotte Belmont, on the other hand, lived in a world where predictability was the enemy. Headlines wrote her life before she lived it. Socialites whispered her scandals before she committed them. To the outside world, she was untouchable. The cold diamond everyone wanted but no one could hold. So what happens when a diamond collides with something as simple as an ordinary girl's hands? It should have been just 1 delivery. A week later it was 3, then 5. And Avery realized that every time she knocked on that oversized door, her pulse betrayed her. She told herself it was nerves. Rich people were intimidating. But nerves didn't explain why she memorized the curve of Charlotte's collarbone, why she replayed the sound of Charlotte's voice when she couldn't sleep. One Thursday, Avery's battered Honda stalled outside the Belmont gate. She slammed the steering wheel, praying it would start again. But the car betrayed her, coughing one last time before dying completely. Perfect. Just perfect. Charlotte stepped outside, phone in hand, dressed in casual silk like it was armor. Her brows arched as she spotted Avery kicking her car door. "Problems?" Avery flushed. "Nothing I can't handle." Charlotte's lips curved, not quite a smile, more like amusement dancing dangerously close to condescension. "Clearly." She glanced at Avery's car, then back at her. "I'll have someone drive you home." "No thanks," Avery said quickly. "I don't need charity." For the first time, Charlotte's expression cracked. "Is that what you think this is?" Avery opened her mouth, ready to argue, but the words tangled in her throat. Charlotte's gaze pinned her, cold but searching, as if peeling back layers Avery didn't even know she had. In that moment, Avery understood something terrifying. Charlotte Belmont wasn't just rich. She was lonely. The city buzzed beyond the Belmont gates, but inside time twisted. Deliveries turned into conversations. Conversations turned into moments. It started small. Charlotte asked Avery what she thought of the overpriced croissants. Avery shrugged. "Honestly, they taste like cardboard dipped in butter." Charlotte laughed, actually laughed, the sound startlingly unpolished. Another day, Charlotte lingered by the doorway. "Why do you do this?" she asked, motioning to the bags. "Because rent doesn't pay itself," Avery replied. "That's not what I mean." Charlotte's voice softened, almost hesitant. "Why do you stay?" "Ordinary." Avery blinked, unsure whether to feel insulted or flattered. "Maybe because life isn't supposed to be extraordinary all the time." Charlotte looked away, her jaw tightening, and Avery realized she had said something no one else dared to. But every fairy tale has a monster lurking. For Charlotte, it was her mother Margaret Belmont, sharp-eyed, sharper-tongued, the true architect of the Belmont Empire. She saw everything, controlled everything, and had no patience for distractions. When she spotted Avery for the first time, standing awkwardly in the Belmont foyer with grocery bags, Margaret's expression turned to ice. "Who are you?" she demanded. Avery straightened. "Delivery." "Not anymore." Margaret's words cut like glass. "We'll have someone else handle that." Charlotte didn't flinch, but later, in the solitude of her bedroom, she texted Avery. "Ignore her. Come tomorrow." Avery stared at the screen, heart racing. She should walk away. She should. But she didn't. By the time spring rolled around, Avery knew she was in trouble. Because it wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper. Something that made her chest ache when Charlotte's laughter filled the room. Something that made her furious when Charlotte pretended she didn't care about anything. And Charlotte, despite every wall she had built, let Avery in. One night, after too much wine and too many unsaid words, Charlotte whispered, "You don't know what it's like to have everything and feel nothing." Avery reached out, her fingers brushing Charlotte's hand. "Then let me help you feel something." The silence after was heavy, dangerous. Charlotte didn't pull away. But secrets like theirs couldn't stay hidden forever. The tabloids always sniffed out stories, and when a grainy photo of Avery leaving the Belmont estate appeared online, headlines screamed, "Heiress entertains mystery woman." Charlotte's mother exploded. "You think you can throw away your future for a delivery girl?" Margaret's voice thundered through the dining hall. Charlotte's hands trembled, but her voice was steel. "She's not just a delivery girl." "Then what is she?" Margaret sneered. "Your rebellion? Your distraction?" Charlotte's lips parted, but before she could answer, Avery stepped forward, heart pounding. "I'm the one who actually sees her," Avery said quietly. "Not the money. Not the name. Just her." The room went silent. And in that silence, Avery knew whether this ended in ruin or redemption, she had already fallen too far to turn back. The storm was only beginning. Charlotte's world demanded perfection. Avery's world demanded survival. And somewhere between those demands, the two of them carved a fragile space for something reckless, forbidden, and desperately real. Every glance was a risk. Every touch a revolution. And neither of them was ready for how much it would cost. The fallout came faster than either of them expected. Within 24 hours of the photo surfacing, Avery's phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls from unknown numbers. Messages from strangers. Half of them cruel, the other half curious, all of them invasive. She'd never seen her name trending before. But there it was, stapled next to Charlotte's on gossip blogs. Delivery Girl Dalliance, one headline called it. Like Avery was a fling, an accessory, an accident in Charlotte's flawless life. Her manager at the grocery store called her in that night. "Avery," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're good at your job. But this publicity. You're firing me?" He sighed. "You need to understand. This isn't about you. It's about customers. They're already whispering. We can't afford the attention." Avery swallowed the burn in her throat. "So I lose my job because I delivered groceries to the wrong address?" "I'm sorry," he said. But his eyes told her he wasn't. He was relieved to let her go before the chaos spread. Meanwhile, Charlotte was under siege in her own home. Her mother summoned her to the dining hall, the same cold room where decades of Belmont deals had been negotiated. Margaret Belmont sat at the head of the table, her posture immaculate, her pearls gleaming under the chandelier. "You've embarrassed this family," Margaret said flatly. "Do you realize how fragile our reputation is? Do you understand what you've risked?" Charlotte, dressed in a simple black blouse, her rebellion against the gowns her mother preferred, met her gaze without blinking. "I risked nothing. I simply let someone into my life who isn't afraid to tell me the truth." "Truth?" Margaret's voice sharpened. "She's an employee. A distraction. She cannot offer you anything but scandal." Charlotte's hands curled into fists beneath the table. "Maybe scandal is what I need." Margaret's lips thinned. "You will end this. Immediately. Or you'll lose more than just your inheritance." Charlotte's chest constricted, but her voice stayed calm. "You already took my childhood. What else is left to lose?" For a fraction of a second, Margaret flinched. Then her mask returned, colder than ever. That night, Charlotte escaped. She called Avery, her voice low, trembling. "Meet me at the pier." Midnight. Avery hesitated. "Charlotte, this is dangerous. They're watching you." "I don't care. Please." Avery showed up. Of course she did. The pier stretched into the dark water, the moonlight scattering silver across the waves. Charlotte stood at the edge, her silk blouse whipping in the wind, her hair undone. For once she looked less like an heiress and more like a girl running from the weight of the world. Avery approached slowly. "You shouldn't be here." "I needed to see you," Charlotte whispered. Their eyes met. And suddenly the chaos of headlines, threats, and family expectations disappeared. There was only the water, the wind, and the unbearable gravity pulling them together. Charlotte stepped closer. "Tell me this is real," she said, her voice breaking. Avery lifted a trembling hand to Charlotte's cheek. "It's real. Too real." And when their lips finally met, soft, desperate, inevitable, the world held its breath. But reality didn't stay paused for long. By the next morning, Avery's apartment door was plastered with reporters. She had to sneak out the back just to buy milk. Strangers shouted her name on the street. Some cheered. Others spat cruel words. At the Belmont estate, things were worse. Margaret tightened her grip, scheduling Charlotte into endless meetings, luncheons, and galas to prove she was still the perfect heiress. Charlotte played along in public, her smile flawless, but Avery could see the cracks forming whenever Charlotte managed to sneak a phone call. "I can't breathe in this house," Charlotte whispered one night. "I feel like I'm drowning." "Then come with me," Avery said. "We'll go somewhere else. Anywhere. Just you and me." Charlotte was silent for a long time. "I want to. God, I want to. But leaving means losing everything." Avery's chest ached. "You already lost yourself in there." Charlotte's breath hitched, but before she could reply, her mother's voice echoed in the background. The line went dead. The breaking point came at the Belmont Spring Gala. It was the event of the season, cameras flashing, politicians and billionaires mingling in gowns and tuxedos. Charlotte stood beside her mother, her diamond necklace a leash more than an accessory. And Avery was nowhere near invited. But fate, or perhaps recklessness, drove Avery to the gala anyway. She stood outside across the street, watching through the grand windows as Charlotte moved like a doll in a display case. The orchestra played. Guests laughed. Charlotte's smile never reached her eyes. Avery's stomach twisted. She couldn't just stand there. She pushed past the guards, heart pounding, every nerve screaming. She didn't care about protocol, didn't care about consequences. She cared about Charlotte. Inside, the room fell silent as Avery entered. Whispers rippled like wildfire. Charlotte froze, glass of champagne halfway to her lips. Margaret's face turned to stone. "You," she hissed, striding forward. "How dare you?" But Avery didn't look at Margaret. She only looked at Charlotte. "Is this what you want?" Avery's voice rang across the ballroom, trembling but strong. "To be their perfect doll? Or do you want to be you?" Charlotte's breath caught. Her hands shook. Everyone watched, the cameras, the guests, the gossipers. The weight of 1,000 eyes pressed down. And then slowly, Charlotte set her glass down. She walked across the marble floor, every step an act of rebellion, until she stood in front of Avery. The silence was deafening. Charlotte's lips curved into the smallest, most dangerous smile. "I want to be me." And she kissed Avery. Right there, under the chandeliers, in front of the world. Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed. Margaret's fury was palpable. But none of it mattered. For the first time in her life, Charlotte Belmont chose herself. The aftermath was brutal. Margaret disowned her daughter that very night. By morning, headlines screamed of scandal, betrayal, disgrace. Charlotte's inheritance was revoked. Her accounts were frozen. She was cut off. Avery felt the weight of it instantly. Gone were the luxury cars that picked Charlotte up. Gone were the endless resources. Suddenly, Charlotte was standing in Avery's cramped apartment, holding a paper bag of takeout, laughing nervously. "I don't even know how to order food without an assistant," Charlotte admitted. Avery grinned, handing her chopsticks. "Then it's time you learned." It should have been sweet. And in some ways it was. Their nights were filled with laughter, stolen kisses, whispered confessions in the dark. But reality crept in. Charlotte had never lived without money. She didn't know how to navigate grocery aisles, how to pay bills, how to handle the constant stares when strangers recognized her. And Avery, already stretched thin, now had another person to protect. One evening, Avery found Charlotte sitting on the fire escape, her eyes distant. "You regret it," Avery said softly. Charlotte looked up quickly. No. Never you. She paused. But I regret not being stronger sooner. I let her control me for so long. I don't even know who I am without the money. Avery sat beside her, their knees touching. You're someone who makes me believe in things I didn't think were possible. That has nothing to do with money. Charlotte's throat tightened. She leaned her head on Avery's shoulder. What if I can't do this? What if I can't survive in your world? Avery pressed a kiss to her hair. Then we'll survive together. But survival wasn't simple. Bills piled up. Avery took on longer shifts, barely sleeping. Charlotte tried. She applied for jobs, stumbled through interviews, but every employer either recognized her or doubted she could handle the work. The tabloids didn't help. Paparazzi followed them relentlessly, snapping photos of Charlotte carrying grocery bags, of Avery kissing her cheek, of their smallest fights blown into scandals. Heiress reduced to begging. Delivery girl controls Belmont Heiress. It wore on them. One night, after Avery came home exhausted from a double shift, she found Charlotte pacing the tiny apartment, her eyes wild. I can't do this, Charlotte burst out. I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere. Avery dropped her keys, her stomach twisting. Don't say that. Charlotte's hand shook. I gave up everything for you, and I don't even know if I can make you happy. Avery stepped forward, voice raw. You didn't give it up for me. You gave it up for yourself. For your freedom. Don't twist that into a burden I never asked you to carry. Charlotte froze, tears glistening in her eyes. The air between them was sharp, fragile. For the first time, silence didn't feel like comfort. It felt like distance. And Avery wondered if love was enough to bridge it. The fight hung between them like smoke that refused to clear. For days, Avery and Charlotte tiptoed around each other. Avery would come home late, her shoulders heavy from work, while Charlotte tried too hard to appear fine, cooking meals she burned, cleaning dishes she broke, smiling too brightly at jokes that weren't funny. The apartment felt smaller, the silence sharper. One evening, Avery returned to find Charlotte sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by piles of unopened mail, bills, past due notices, final warnings. Charlotte looked up, her face pale. We're drowning, aren't we? Avery dropped her bag onto the couch and crouched beside her. I'll figure it out. You always say that, Charlotte whispered. But it's always you figuring it out. I don't even know how to save us. Avery's throat tightened. We don't need saving. We just need time. Charlotte shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. Time won't pay the rent. Time won't fix the fact that I'm useless outside of that mansion. You're not useless. Then why does it feel like you're the only one carrying us? Charlotte's voice broke. Avery flinched, pain flashing across her features. She wanted to argue, to remind Charlotte that love wasn't about balance sheets or scorekeeping. But the exhaustion in her bones silenced her. That night, Avery lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if love could really survive reality's weight. The cracks widened. Charlotte received a call from an old friend, a socialite named Vivian, who spoke with honeyed cruelty. Darling, I saw the latest article. Living in a shoebox now, are we? I almost didn't recognize you without the diamonds. Charlotte clenched her jaw. At least I'm living honestly. Vivian laughed. Honestly? Or foolishly? You threw away the world for a delivery girl. How long before she realizes she can't afford you? Charlotte slammed the phone down, but Vivian's words burrowed deep, festering. That night, she didn't tell Avery about the call. She just stared at her while Avery slept, torn between love and fear, devotion and doubt. The final blow came unexpectedly. Avery's mother was rushed to the hospital, complications from years of untreated diabetes. The medical bills were staggering. Avery tried to hide the papers, folding them into her jacket, but Charlotte found them. Why didn't you tell me? Charlotte demanded. Because I didn't want you to worry, Avery muttered. I should be worrying. She's your mother. We need money for her care. Avery's chest ached. And where are we supposed to get it, Charlotte? I've already taken every extra shift I can. We're barely scraping by as it is. Charlotte's voice trembled. I could go back. Just for a while. My mother. No, Avery cut her off sharp. Don't you dare. She'd help if I asked. She'd own you again. That's what she wants. Charlotte's eyes filled. And what if that's the only way to save your mom? To save us? Avery's voice rose. Then maybe we don't get saved. The words were out before she could stop them, jagged and cruel. Charlotte stared at her, shattered. For the first time since they'd met, she looked at Avery like a stranger. The next morning Charlotte was gone. Her side of the closet was empty. Her toothbrush missing. A single note left on the counter. I'm sorry. I'll come back when I can breathe. Avery stood frozen, the paper trembling in her hands. She wanted to scream, to tear the note apart, to run out the door and find Charlotte. But her body wouldn't move. All she could do was sink to the floor and let the silence swallow her. Charlotte returned to the Belmont estate. Margaret welcomed her with a victorious smile, but Charlotte felt nothing. The mansion was as suffocating as ever, but it was quiet, orderly, controlled. And for a moment, that control felt easier than the chaos of Avery's apartment. Yet every night Charlotte lay in her old bed, staring at the chandelier, aching for the warmth of Avery's arms. The mansion had everything except her. Meanwhile, Avery's world collapsed further. Without Charlotte's presence, the apartment felt hollow. Avery buried herself in work, visiting her mom at the hospital, ignoring the sympathetic glances of neighbors who had seen the headlines. She told herself she was fine. She told herself she didn't miss Charlotte. But one night after her shift, she sat in her car and broke down, sobbing into the steering wheel. She realized she wasn't angry at Charlotte for leaving. She was angry because part of her understood why. Months passed. Charlotte reappeared in magazines, standing beside her mother at charity galas. Her smiles looked flawless, but Avery knew the truth behind them. She had kissed that mouth, held that hand, touched that face when the cameras weren't watching. She could see the emptiness hiding behind the sparkle. And Charlotte saw Avery tune the news, mentioned briefly as the ex-girlfriend of the Belmont heiress, working tirelessly, struggling to pay off debts. The distance between them grew, but the thread connecting them refused to snap. Fate intervened one rainy evening. Avery was leaving the hospital drenched when a black car pulled up. The window rolled down. Charlotte sat inside, her eyes red, her hands trembling. "Get in," she whispered. Avery froze, rain dripping from her hair. "Why are you here?" Charlotte's voice cracked. "Because I can't do this without you." For a moment, Avery wanted to slam the door shut, to protect herself from the pain. But the sight of Charlotte, the woman who had wrecked her world and also filled it with light, broke her resolve. She slid into the car, rainwater pooling at her feet. Neither of them spoke as the driver pulled away. The silence was heavy, fragile. Finally, Charlotte whispered, "I tried to live without you. I can't." Avery stared at her, torn between anger and love. "Then why did you leave?" "Because I was afraid," Charlotte admitted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Afraid I wasn't strong enough, that I'd drag you down with me. But being without you hurt worse than anything my mother could do." Avery's chest ached. "You broke me, Charlotte." "I know," Charlotte whispered. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to put you back together if you'll let me." Avery looked away, her throat tight. "It's not that simple." "Maybe not," Charlotte said softly. "But neither is love. And what we had, it's worth the fight." The car hummed through the rain, carrying them into the unknown. Avery sat in silence, her heart warring with itself. Was love enough to heal what had broken? Or were they doomed to shatter again? She didn't know. But when Charlotte's trembling hand reached for hers in the dark, Avery didn't pull away. The road ahead was unclear. Margaret Belmont would never accept them. The world would always watch. The bills wouldn't disappear. But for the first time in months, Avery let herself believe, just a little, that love could still win. The rain that night was only the beginning. Charlotte didn't disappear this time. She came back into Avery's life slowly, carefully, like a woman relearning how to breathe. She didn't ask to stay at the apartment, she simply showed up with groceries, with takeout, with her unpolished attempts at normalcy. And Avery, though still raw from the wound of abandonment, let her in. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to share coffee at dawn, to sit in silence by her mother's hospital bed, to stand shoulder to shoulder at the kitchen sink as if they'd never been apart. Trust, Avery realized, was a fragile thing. It didn't return in grand gestures, it returned in the quiet choices, in the way Charlotte remembered how Avery took her tea, in the way Avery didn't pull away when Charlotte brushed her hand against hers. But Margaret Belmont wasn't done. She arrived at the hospital one afternoon, sweeping down the hallway in heels that clicked like gunshots. Her presence made nurses whisper and patients stare. Charlotte froze when she saw her. "Mother." Margaret's gaze shifted to Avery, sharp as glass. "Leave us." Avery's fists clenched. "This isn't your house. You don't give the orders here." Margaret ignored her, turning to Charlotte. "You're humiliating yourself. Living like this. Clinging to this girl. Come home. All will be forgiven." Charlotte's throat tightened. The old reflex obedience rose like a tide. For years, she had lived under this woman's shadow, shaped and controlled by her expectations. But then Avery's hand slipped into hers, warm, steady. And for the first time, Charlotte didn't flinch. "No," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I won't come home. Not if it means losing myself. Not if it means losing her." Margaret's mask cracked, fury blazing in her eyes. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Charlotte whispered. "But at least the regret will be mine." Margaret turned on her heel and stormed away. The sound of her heels faded, but the echo of Charlotte's defiance lingered. Avery looked at her, awe in her eyes. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Charlotte's hand squeezed hers. "No. Loving you was." Life didn't magically improve after that. The bills still came. Avery still worked long hours. Charlotte still struggled to adjust to a world where no one bowed to her name. But something had shifted. The fear was gone. They weren't hiding anymore. And when Avery's mother passed away quietly one autumn evening, Charlotte was the one holding Avery upright, whispering through Avery's sobs, "You're not alone. Not anymore. Not ever again." Months blurred into a new rhythm. Charlotte enrolled in community college, determined to build a future on her own terms. She studied late into the night, her notebooks filled with messy handwriting. Avery teased her, but secretly she was proud of the woman who refused to be defined by her last name. Avery found better work to managing a local market, using the years of delivery knowledge to keep things running smoothly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And stability felt like luxury. The tabloids eventually lost interest. Scandals grew old. The world moved on. And for the first time, Avery and Charlotte had something close to peace. One crisp winter morning, Charlotte dragged Avery out of bed before dawn. "Come on," she whispered, her breath misting in the air. "I want to show you something." Half asleep, Avery followed her through the city streets until they reached the pier, the same pier where they'd first kissed, where everything had changed. The sky was streaked with pink and gold. The water shimmered. Charlotte turned to Avery, her eyes soft. "Do you remember what you told me that night?" Avery frowned. "That it was real?" Charlotte nodded. "It is. Still is. And it always will be." She pulled something from her coat pocket, a ring, simple and unadorned. No diamonds, no flashy display. Just a silver band, shining in the morning light. Avery's breath caught. "Charlotte, I don't want palaces or inheritances," Charlotte said, her voice thick. "I just want mornings like this. With you. Always with you." Tears blurred Avery's vision as Charlotte slipped the ring into her hand. "Yes," Avery whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed, the sun rising behind them, the city stirring awake. It wasn't the fairy tale the world had imagined for Charlotte Belmont. It was better because it was theirs. Years later, people would still whisper when they walked by together. Some with awe, some with scorn. But neither Avery nor Charlotte cared. They built a life from scratch, messy, imperfect, and achingly real. A small apartment filled with laughter. Late-night arguments that ended in softer kisses. Quiet dinners on the fire escape. Shared dreams written on scraps of paper stuck to the fridge. Charlotte never returned to the mansion. Avery never returned to delivering groceries. Instead, they built something else entirely, a home. And in that home, two women who never should have met, from worlds that should have torn them apart, found what everyone else spent lifetimes searching for. Not perfection. Not wealth. Not fame. Love. Just love. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.